to Leader's Edge,
where
Learning is a never-ending
journey limitless vistas. Good day, everybody. Welcome to the Leader's Edge, and today it's season 9, episode 5, with a great topic called How to Be Your Own Boss. And our guest for today is none other than podcaster extraordinaire, a videocaster, and coach to so many people who want to have their own podcast. But enough about what I think about who our guest is, because I'd love to hear her introduce herself. Her name is PJ Neri. Ladies and gentlemen, let's all welcome her to the virtual stage.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here. My name is PJ Neri. It's short for Princess Jasmine Jewer Tiongson-Neri. I know it's a mouthful, but yes, everybody calls me PJ Neri, and I am the founder and CEO of Visionary Media. My small company helps coaches with done for you podcast production and management, making sure that they do and they spread their message and tell their stories stress free. Thank you for having me here.
You're very welcome, PJ. Now, of course, one of the things that everybody has on their mind is given how it is so difficult to manage a business, especially a new one, or especially when you're having to juggle so many things.
Mhm.
And I assume you're probably working from home, just like me.
Mhm.
So, PJ, how do you juggle being a mother, managing a business, and you know, remaining passionate about being your own boss? How does that work out for you?
Well, I have to be honest, it's never easy. I mean, every single day, I still find new ways to really maximize my time with my son and my family at the same time managing my business. But when I started, actually, I used to be a flight attendant. Then I gave up that job so that I can focus more of my time building my own family. And I promised myself that once I have my family, I want to dedicate as much time as I can for them, especially when I had my son, because typically this is no shade, not throwing shade on anyone, but when I was flying, I also see a lot of colleagues where after they give birth, they leave their child, back in the
Oh,
Philippines, and well, different people have different circumstances, but that really stayed in my mind, and that is something that I didn't want to do. And I also came across a magazine that said you cannot hug your child on Skype. So I was so determined that after my career in the skies, when I start my family, I want to be there for my son. I want to be hands on. And so when I started this business, in the beginning, it was very, very difficult because you have to manage all the operations in your business, as well as helping clients, looking for leads, things like that. And I also have a podcast. But really, it just boils down to boundaries, to priorities, actually. So um, it's still a work in progress, but I can confidently say that weekends are just reserved for them. So it's something that we look forward to all the time.
mm. And I think you made the right choice there. The reason I say that is I resonate with what you're expressing. After 10 years in the corporate world, when I finally decided to settle down, I decided that wealth wasn't my pursuit, but rather value and meaning in life was. And I wanted to be at home where I could watch my children grow. And so, as a
Mm.
consultant trainer, I get to do that. And especially strange to thank the pandemic, but thanks to the pandemic,
Mhm,
most of
yeah.
my work is now from home. And my
Mhm.
kids, who are learning also online, get to spend time with me. So I am truly watching them grow. And I see what you're saying, that you're loath to not be involved in the growing up process of your son. So
Hmm.
congratulations for that. Now,
And to you
PJ,
too.
thank you. Um, you did mention that initially you spent part of your life in the skies. Just curious, what drew you to becoming a flight attendant? Because I have a friend who's also a flight attendant and transitioned
Mhm.
into a different career. Tell me about what attracted you to joining the friendly skies.
Ever since I was young, I always had this dream to travel. I remember when I was little, my mom always told us that she always wanted to go to Rome. And
Oh,
so when I was growing up, I really promised her that one day I'm going to take you to Rome. And I did. We did, my
okay.
brother and I. So I'm not sure what year was it, maybe like 8 or 9 years ago. We actually brought her to Rome, and it was a surreal moment for my mom that we made that dream come true for her. So I always was attracted with the idea of travel. I always watch travel shows. I always love looking at travel magazines. And
Hmm.
so right after college, I just spent, a little bit of time being a call center agent. And then after that, I applied for Philippine Airlines. I stayed there for a year. And then after that, I applied for Emirates Airlines, an airline that is based in the UAE, and spent 10 years there. So it was a very adventurous career. And whenever I look back, I still have a big smile on my face because I had so many beautiful experiences when I was a flight attendant. So yeah.
Wow. So you made a wish come true. Not just your wish when you were still studying, but a family wish, a mother's wish come true. And I guess it still holds true that when you work for an airline, one of the benefits is that your family gets to travel at a half fare. I think. I think there's the
There,
benefit for that, right?
yeah, there's 50% off tickets, and there's also 90% tickets. Yeah, 90% off tickets. So yeah, those are very good perks for an airline personnel. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. And because you spent 10 years with the Emirates, then that means that that's pretty much early retirement. So that benefit still holds true to this day, I guess.
Not really, and it differs from airline to airline, but for Emirates
Oh,
in particular, you have to spend at least 15 years. So my brother, he's still there. So he's just completing his 15 years, so all of us will will enjoy that benefit. But when I resigned, I think I
yeah.
had 5, so I made sure that we used those tickets. So what I did was after I resigned, my family and I went to London to visit my brother. And yeah, so that's what we did.
And that's really great because it means that while traveling the world may have been your dream as a young child, and I'm sure it's still there, it's
Hmm.
just taking a different track now because where before you used to serve passengers on a plane, now you get served. Because yeah, because
Hmm.
you have your own business and you have your family and every incentive to help them see the world as you did when you used to be in the airlines. I'd like to explore a little bit your early life because our viewers always like to find out how did PJ start out when she was a young child? Were you somebody who looked at the skies and said, I wonder what that is. Why there are a pair of white lines in the sky?
Hmm.
And then somebody told you, oh, that's an airplane. And you wondered, okay, what kind of job allows you to ride in those? Uh, Tell us a little bit about what it was like for PJ when she was a young girl.
Well, it's very, very different. When I was younger, my first dream was actually to be a doctor because
Oh,
my mom is a deaf and mute. And when I was younger, I always
yeah.
thought maybe I should be a doctor because maybe I can allow her to hear again in the future. But you see, pursuing a medical career is also not easy. It will take many years, and at the same time, for financial reasons, it's also not very affordable, right? So,
Mm.
I had to. I mean, as a child, you have many different dreams. So being a doctor was the first one, and then as I grew up, when you're watching TV and you see all these amazing places, oh, that's so beautiful. I want to go there because I grew up in Baguio City. It's a very small
Oh,
city.
yeah.
So I spent most of my childhood until college. I was in Baguio. So beyond Baguio City, I really wanted to explore. I remember my favorite television show then. My brother and I used to watch it. We always watch Discovery Channel, travel. I think it's a travel segment of Discovery Channel. And whenever we see countries, whenever they feature countries, our eyes just, we marvel and we want to go there. So when my mom also watches, that's why she told me, "Oh, I want to go to Rome," and that really stuck with me. And so
Mm.
I said, "One day we're gonna have coffee in Rome." Except when we went there, we didn't have coffee. We had pizza, and it was just surreal. To fulfill a dream for your mother is just one of the best things in life. In fact, I remember when my family and I went to Rome, I stood there. We were in the Vatican. I stood in the middle of the square or somewhere, and then I held my mom's hand. And then she forgot about that dream. And so I reminded her in that moment. I told her, "Mom, do you remember you told me when I was little you always wanted to go to Rome?" And then her eyes went wide and she said, "Yes, and now you're here." And then she just wept and then we just hugged. So I
Wow.
cannot forget that moment ever. So yeah.
So, in a future interview, if anybody ever asks you, PJ, what was your happiest moment? That will probably rank up there. One of the
Yeah, one
greats.
of the
Yeah.
yes, very,
Um,
very true.
you also mentioned that your mother struggled with hearing, I guess, no? Because you said she's a deaf mute. Did that
Hmm.
mean that you had to learn how to do sign language?
Yes, my brothers and my sister and I, we learned it through her
Mm,
because my mom, she also used to teach deaf and mute children,
mm,
and so sometimes she would tag us along in her class,
yeah.
and we just learn it. But it's the sign language that slang because
Mm,
when we speak at home, when we communicate at home, it's more of the slang sign language. We do understand some
right.
words but not the formal language,
Yeah.
so to speak. Yeah.
I used to help out in the deaf mute ministry of our church,
Oh.
interpreting for the pastor. And then I
Mm-hmm.
recall that the people who were struggling with their hearing got impatient with me because the pastor spoke so fast. God created the birds,
Mm.
God created the animals, God created. So finally, in frustration, because he was going so fast and I couldn't keep up, and I just go like, God created all, and and
Sure.
just all, and then everybody in the gallery who were hearing impaired chuckled
Mhm.
because they understood my frustration, and
So they don't
yeah,
have to wait. Mhm.
they don't have to wait.
Mhm.
Um, and then I remember what you're saying about the unique form of slang that you have to do because early on I would have to say, do you know him? Like, and then
Mhm.
to them that's too slow. So they just use the word for news, which was like that, and
Mhm.
then
Mhm.
point to one person. Yeah. Is he new for you? Is he new?
Mm.
Yeah, that's what
Mhm.
they meant. And for a long time, I had to adjust to that. Your mother must also be very good at lip reading.
Yes, she is. She is definitely. That's why whenever I bring new friends to introduce to her, I always just tell them because they get intimidated, like, how am I
Yeah.
gonna communicate with her? I don't know any sign. I don't know any sign. And I always tell her, no worries. Just, try to exaggerate how you speak because she can read, she can lip read. And I
True.
think for many people who are, having who have disabilities, I think if one sense is gone, the
Mm,
rest are more, I mean, heightened. So they're more sensitive. So even if we're in public and people are talking, she can tell me, oh, they're talking about this. And I said, how do you know? I read their mouths when they're
mm.
speaking. So yeah.
I think that one of the gifts that we get when we learn sign language or when we deal with those who are hearing impaired is that it vastly increases our emotional quotient
Mm-hmm.
because we have to read nuances beyond what they're saying and we study their facial expressions much more carefully. So I guess transitioning now to your professional life, um, I'm thinking that as a business leader, as a business owner, when you help your clients formulate their podcast, do you go into coaching them as well, not just for how they look, how they sound, but how they're communicating their brand during
Mm-hmm.
their shows?
It really depends what the client's needs are because before I work with them, it's important to me that we are aligned when it comes to our values. There's sort of like a pre-qualification because we can't just work with everybody because we have different goals, different ways of doing things, different values. Let's say if a client comes up to me and he needs help, but I might not be the best person to help them. So what I do is I also refer them. So in terms of podcasting, it's not only creating a show. I also do one-on-one consultations because sometimes that's just what is needed. But for a full stack done for you service, we do everything from ideation to execution, making sure that when you create a podcast, it's not just for the hell of it or for the sake of it. I always remind my clients to really dig deep. Why are you creating a podcast? Because this is a commitment. There is such a thing called pod fade. What is pod fade? I experienced it myself. When you launch a podcast, it's a very exciting experience to be able to share your voice to the world, right? But it also requires a lot of planning, identifying who is your ideal listener, because most people miss this. They just think, oh, I'm knowledgeable about this topic, I'll just start a podcast. It doesn't really work that way. There's a lot of preparation that needs to be done before you hit record and start chatting. You really have to identify, why are you starting a podcast? If you want to share your stories, who are you going to speak to? And there's just a lot of things to prepare for before you actually speak on the microphone. And I mentioned PodFade. Um, there are like 2 million podcasts now in the world, but only a fraction are still active. In fact, I think if my memory serves me right, only 20% of all the podcasts right now online are active. So they're
Mm,
just dormant. And like I say this whenever I also get interviewed, when you start a podcast, it's like entering a marriage. You really have to be committed. You have to be committed to creating content, to gathering information from your ideal listeners, understanding what they would like to hear from you. There's just a lot. So prepare well because having an idea is just one part, but there's a lot that really is involved in producing a podcast that's gonna last for a long time.
wow, that those are great insights because I do notice that so many Toastmasters are making the effort to create their own podcast, their own video logs, for example, and they struggle to raise their subscriber base. In other words, to
Mm-hmm.
increase it. Others seem to do it so naturally, so quickly, yet there are those who, even after how many years, they're still single digits in terms of their subscribers. How would you advise those who want to create a large subscriber base quickly? How do they do that?
Well, you really have to have a sound strategy. When you create a podcast, like I said earlier, you have to prepare well. You have to market. You really have to focus your energies as well, not on just creating the content, but marketing your podcast.
Mm,
And the podcasting world is a really exciting community. Use every opportunity to network. You can
mm,
do you can guest in other podcasts. You can use social media. You can also use YouTube. There's also TikTok. There are so many. It can be very overwhelming, but
yeah.
all these things are available. All these things are worth exploring to up your numbers. But there's also one thing I would like to highlight. Actually, two. It's two C's: consistency and content. So
Mm,
when you're doing your content consistently, you're giving your audience something to look forward to. They know when you're going to drop an episode. You don't just go into to pod fade. You really have to give them that, especially when they're starting to enjoy your show. Now, the
mm,
other C is content. It is so important to really give something that they will binge on, that they will find value with, because again, having a podcast is not just a one-way thing.
mm.
Whenever you come up with ideas, oh, there's another thing I forgot:
Okay.
community. So, consistency, content, and community. So, whenever you come up with new episodes, get feedback. If they don't like, let's say, the length of your show, they want it longer or perhaps they want it shorter, listen to them, because they're the ones who are listening and enjoying your show. If let's say they say, oh, there's too many, what do you call this? Like you said earlier, if sometimes they don't like the host talking too much, or let's say they don't like too many guests or anything like that, you can also listen to them at the same time, strike a balance, because at the end of the day you also have to be authentic with your audience. So it's a two-way thing. You listen to them and then prepare something that will allow you to share what they want to hear, but with your own spin on it. So three C's: consistency, content, and community. So remember those three things.
Oh, that's great advice. Um, but I'm sure that for a lot of our viewers, especially those who are contemplating going into this wonderful activity, that there is a lot of confusion about terminologies. Like you hear people saying video cast, video logger or vlogger, and then you have people who say podcasting. Um, Now, if you look at the word podcast, I think it originally started with Apple and how they had audio only as a way of transmitting information. So, could you just briefly take us through like the history of podcasting?
Podcasting has been there for a while, and you are correct. Apple is really the one that started everything. But in theory, or in what do you call this? Uh, Essentially, podcasts are, for those who are not very familiar with it, podcasts are medium that is in audio, purely audio. So
Yeah.
you're like listening to a
Mm,
radio channel, and with the onset, with the influx of many forms of content like video, there's social media, there's so many content out there. Many people also think that audio is not important, but it's actually the other way around. In fact, this pandemic, in the country alone, the Philippines, there has been a spike of listeners.
mm,
For the mental niche alone,
Mhm.
500 something percent increase in listeners. So
Wow.
I think it's still a new thing, especially here in the country, but it's picking up. And I understand why some people are wondering what is a podcast, because I also have, in my circles, they're wondering, like, what do you do? What is a podcast? They're not sure what it is. But essentially, it's just, listening to radio, except it's online, and you can, there's a lot of, what do you call this, podcast directories that you can listen to. Like there's Apple, there's Spotify, and many others. So essentially, that's what a podcast is.
Let me ask you for your opinion. Um, which do you think is more difficult to manage or do, a live cast or something that's pre-recorded?
Hmm, great question. Mm, Let me put it this way. It really depends, but personally, I find live more intimidating and more difficult. It's because I also have, I'm very camera shy. It may not be apparent, but I really am when it's live. uh, Everything is like seen, and people can judge, your
Mhm.
nuances and things like that. It's very intimidating for me, but it's something also that I want to overcome. I actually have a client at the moment, and he's very much into live streaming. And I learned from him that, you know, nobody is perfect. That's the good thing about live streaming, because whenever people watch you, they see everything, and they don't really expect you to be perfect because you are doing a live. So when he said that, it's very comforting as well for me, because ever since, I'm so scared going on a live. I mean, you always have this fear that anything can go wrong. There's
Mhm.
also this imposter syndrome, like, am I gonna be able to pull through, and things like that. So that's my opinion for live. Whereas when it's recorded, nobody's watching. You can still tweak it and things like that. But the danger as well sometimes is, sometimes we miss out on the authenticity part. So it has to be a balance. Whether you're doing a live or whether it is recorded, always think authenticity really is the best. You have to be authentic whenever you're on live. You also have to be prepared as much as you can, and at the same time, when also you're doing your recorded your recorded casts, always keep in mind that, yeah, you, of course, you can be able to fix things here and there, but don't forget, you have to sound authentic, because, like what I think it was Ira Glass or Alex Bloomberg who said that audio is the most honest medium. So whatever you're feeling and you think that, oh, people are not going to know what you feel because they don't see you, it is actually the most honest medium. So whenever you have to go there and record, whether you're doing a live or you're doing a recording, just be you, be authentic, because people will feel that.
Mhm. There is some truth to what you're saying, and not just some, but a lot of truth to that. Because I remember when my son invited me to join him on an Easter vigil.
Mm-hmm.
He's looking forward to becoming a priest someday. So one time he took me to visit this monastery where there was what he referred to as a healing priest. And he said, Dad, would you like to confess to him? And I said, Well, I haven't done that in quite a while. And then he
Mm-hmm.
said, But make sure that when you do, you tell him everything, because he can tell when you're holding back.
Mm-hmm.
And I reflected on that. How does a person tell when I'm holding back? And so hearing you say that the spoken word or just audio is often more authentic, very honest, has the ring of truth to it, because when I did confess to this individual, I found myself unburdening completely. And so when
Mm-hmm.
he gave the absolution, that was a very liberating moment. And I think I must have saved on my my hypertension after that, because when you tell the truth, when you're authentic with another human being, a lot of the stress leaves you. And so I think one of the reasons why podcasting is also very popular is because when a person has value to share with the world, and you're speaking from the heart, you're sharing wisdom authentically and with empathy, then you're able to cause resonance in the people who listen to you. Um, Let me ask you a question, though. I'm curious. Uh, Among those who do podcasts, do you have like some personal favorites, people you also like listening to when you have some time?
I have a couple of favorites, but
Okay.
the one that really stings, I mean, not really stings, but sticks to mind would be the TED Radio Hour show, hosted
Oh,
by Manoush Zamarodi. So that would be one. I also like Alex Bloomberg's Planet Money and How to Save a Planet. I know Planet Money and yes, How to Save a Planet. So if you notice, these podcasts are actually narrative podcasts. What I like about these shows are how creative they are. It's it's not linear how they do these shows. Because for me, personally, I also have a very short attention span whenever I watch or whenever I listen to something, unless I'm very, very interested. But what I like about how they do things is they would inject like a sound effect here or a sound design here, some music to really, put the character on the spot. And it's so nice because I imagine it's like similar to reading a book. Have you ever wondered why people say, let's say, before a Harry Potter movie comes up, they read the book, and then when the movie is out, they get so disappointed. Why? It's because their imagination does not match the movie. So similarly, whenever we're listening to podcasts, we imagine, our minds wonder, oh, this is how they are, or this is the place that they're at. In fact, I'll tell you an example. Alex Bloomberg, he had this like a course, and he recorded himself, uh, with audio, and then he asked the audience, I am I have a fleece. I mean, I have a blanket over my head, but can you describe to me, just by the way I sound, can you describe the blanket I have over my head? And the audience were like giving different opinions. Oh, I think you have a fleece blanket over you. And the other one would say, oh, I think it's a silk blanket. Oh, I think it's a quilt. Like different people have different perceptions. It's because they have their own imagination. They can imagine you, even if you're just talking and you're describing where you are. They have different imaginations, and that's the beauty of narrative podcasting. And that's actually also what we do with visionary media. We want to we want to make shows that are different. We want to
mm,
make your stories really stand out.
mm,
If I may just add as well, earlier, when I mentioned to you that audio is the most honest medium, if you know Grant Cardone, I'm not sure if I pronounce his last name right, but he's a very prolific podcaster, and I think he's a financial coach or something. And one time on his podcast, he had somebody call in or something, and this lady was in distress. You can hear it in her voice, and she was asking Grant Cardone, "Should I move out? Should I pack up and go?" And he sensed that she was in danger. And
mm,
then so Grant Cardone, what he did was he asked her a different question, uh, that somehow the lady didn't really admit anything, but it gave her an idea that she was actually being abused at home.
mm.
So you see, no matter how fake or how much you sugarcoat things, whenever you do a podcast, people will feel it.
Mm.
That's why it's the most honest medium, and that's why podcasting is a very exciting space.
You know what? Now you've given me some shows to check out and
Yeah, do check them. They're really good.
and listen to, because the way you described it, it seems so fascinating. It's the same reason why people fall in love with books, the
Mm-hmm.
hard copy instead of, say, Kindle. Because when you read the author's words, your imagination kicks in. And oftentimes it's scarier than what was written on the book itself. Then, yes, I agree with you. When you go to see the movie, you go, this is incredibly disappointing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so true. Because I mean, when you listen to narrative podcasts, there will be sound effects where, let's say, they're in a grocery store, and all those noises. Sometimes,
Mm,
when we're a podcast, when we're doing a podcast, we would often think that these noises are very annoying. They don't
mm.
really we always think that we have to eradicate all the noise. I say it really depends on the format of your show and your intention, because sometimes you can include those background noises. They add flavor to your show. There is this social network that is purely audio. It's called Racket. It's an audio community. It's like TikTok now, but imagine it as just purely audio. And I remember there was a creator. He just happens to have an idea, and he wants to share it with the community. He was walking his dog while he was recording his voice, and it was so nice that people, they loved hearing all his rackets. That's what they call it, rackets, because it's so natural. He's walking his dog, he just thought about something, and then he shared whatever was in his mind.
Mm,
That's the beauty of audio. You can be as raw as you can. You can also
mm.
be very produced, and you can be very formal. Like, there are no rules, really,
Yeah.
audio.
So PJ, that also raises a very valid point. Some people can get so concerned about their equipment, so they'll invest heavily in studio quality, uh, audio equipment, mixers,
Mm,
microphones, headphones, and yet here you are telling us that even your simple smartphone, for instance, set on record as you walk your dog can appeal more to people because of the ambient noises. So instead of, say, editing those out to studio quality levels, it's allowing the noises to filter in because of the ambience. So,
mm-hmm.
how important is ambience really to a show? Is it something that we need to manage? Do we try to create it with, say, sound effects, or do we just let nature do it for us?
I know what I said is really an unpopular opinion, because most podcasters, they want their audio to be so clean, so
Yeah.
smooth, and things like that. But what I mean with, including all these noises,
Mm,
again, it really depends on what kind of storytelling do you want to do. Do you
mm,
want it really raw? Do you want it very formal?
mm,
Because at the end of the day, there are many ways to tell a story. There are many ways for you to reach your audiences. So let's say somebody wants to start a podcast. I don't want to tell them, oh, you should invest in a mic first before you start. That's the barrier, because
yeah.
you can start a podcast anytime you want. You don't have to buy an expensive microphone. You don't need to buy whatever equipment is there if you don't have them yet. You can actually start a podcast with your phone, and there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes, I have a very old iPhone. It's really, really old. And when you use whatever gear you have, you make the most out of it. Magic happens when you are, sometimes artists, creatives, they're the overthinkers. And, oh, I have to have this and I have to have this. It's like cooking. You want the ingredients to be complete, right? But when you have the lack of equipment, that's when you become more creative.
Mm,
I For example, for if you want to start a podcast and you just have a phone, there are many apps you can use, and there's also Anchor. And if you want to sound good, I remember doing a voiceover for a podcast and I didn't have equipment before. I just used the headset, the built-in microphone of a headset, and I recorded inside a closet. Literally. I'm not kidding. And
Okay.
that was used for a podcast intro of a client. So see, there's no excuse. If you want to make it happen, you can make it happen. And once you you have the means, then invest in more equipment. But when you're starting, if you're gonna make that excuse that I don't have equipment, it's a bad excuse because you can always start a podcast with whatever equipment you have.
That is such a good message for our viewers because for anybody who may have something to share and is hesitating because they're not ready yet. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
the key, I think what I'm getting from you is that just start, just get
Just
started.
start.
We learn as we go along. Everyone has a learning curve. Even a podcast will have that until
Mm-hmm.
finally you find your level, maybe even dare I say niche,
Mm-hmm.
until you get to refine it and hone it so that it gets its own brand. Eventually, it gets its own brand. Um, so thank you for answering that because it's a valid question. Some people don't have to worry about investing the hardware side. What they need to focus on, I think, and what I'm getting from you is the message.
Yes.
Forget about yourself, focus on the message. Let it speak out to people because if they find value in what you're saying, they'll become your fans.
Yes. There is a concept that's very much popular in Twitter, and it's called building in public. And
Mm.
that concept actually means that, a lot of creators, when they want to validate their idea, they ask the audience, let's say, oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing a podcast, and I'm gonna mess up, but what are your suggestions? So while they're doing it, they're getting feedback because the podcast is for them. So, I my friend Brian, we were just talking earlier because I'm also a bit of a perfectionist, and it's something that I really am trying to overcome every day.
Mm.
I just recorded another podcast. I mean, another episode for my upcoming podcast, and I said, "Oh, Brian, I heard this mistake I did, and then this and this and this," and what he said is so true, but it's so funny as well because I told him, I don't like this, but yeah, let's just go with it because I'm delaying it and delaying it. Progress over perfection. And you know what he said? PJ, there's only one person who's perfect. And I said, who? It's nobody. So nobody is perfect. So see, like, oh yeah, that's true. So nobody is perfect. So uh, don't let it stop you from creating content. Yes, you don't have to be perfect, but of course, the listening experience of the audience also matters. And whatever you can do to minimize whatever is the sound that will not really add to the story you're telling, then do something. Work with whatever you have. If let's say you are creating a podcast about, let's say, horror stories or whatever, maybe you can record while there's thunderstorms. You see, make use of whatever is in your environment. But let's say you're doing a podcast about horror stories, and then your kid is watching Coco Melon in the background. I mean, that won't add to the story, right? So be very intentional with these elements, no matter how low tech your equipment is. If you have to record inside a closet to minimize, do that. So my main thing is, don't overthink about your equipment. Work with what you have and really concentrate on how you deliver your stories, and really make every element and part of your story count so that your listeners will enjoy it, will really get value
Mm.
out of it.
You mentioned earlier consistency. So I'd like to
Mm-hmm.
explore that a little bit. For a podcast to really grow its audience and to be something that people look forward to, what would you recommend as a frequency? Is there like a sweet spot? Like, should it be once a week? Should it be every day? How does that go?
Again, I will not have a definite answer to that because it really depends on many things: the format of your show, the length of your show, the bandwidth for the podcaster, like your schedule. Does your schedule permit you to do it once a week, twice a week? What else? There's so many factors to consider. So what I can say is that this is also what I tell my clients whenever we have a discovery call. I always ask them, how much time can you dedicate to creating audio content? Because again, we want to avoid getting into pod fade. Like, first time you're so excited, I'm gonna record, and then after the third month, I'm so busy, and then later on, there's no more audio content to record. So you have to be very realistic.
Mm.
Even if most popular podcasts do it, let's say twice a week or weekly, the question is, can you commit doing that?
Yeah. Yeah.
See? So
Mm.
you really have to think about, can I really commit 3 hours a day, 2 hours a day, or like 2 hours a week to do this, like only this, and
Mhm.
just be consistent? Because, if you tell your audience that, hey, we're doing this, come back after 2 weeks, if your material is that good, they will wait, they will
Mm.
anticipate it. So it's all
Yeah.
about consistency. Whatever frequency of publication you decide to do, be very consistent, be very intentional, and be realistic as well. Be kind to
Mm.
yourself. If you feel like you can only do once a week, then do it once a week, because you can change it. If you have more time, then later on, publish more frequently. If you don't have time, batch content, do 6 episodes all at once, so you're good for the rest of the month or something. It's all about organization. It's all about being realistic and just be consistent.
That is very, very good, because I do remember I drew a parallel between uh, pod fade and burnout, because
Mm-hmm.
they're so similar.
Yes.
It's so easy, as you said, to lose the fire, to lose the passion. Um, have you seen it? Have you seen this happen in some people? And what advice would you give to help them rekindle the fire, as it were?
It happened to me. It
Yeah.
really happened to
Okay.
me. Yes. So
All
I'll just
right.
tell my part of the story.
Yeah. Please.
When I started with podcasting, I didn't know anything. I was clueless. I don't know what to do. Like many people, I was also very intimidated with the equipment. Oh, I don't
Mm.
have it yet.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know how to really arrange, you know, these on my podcast. Like, I was just very lost. Even with the
Mm.
questions I asked my guests, I'm just very unorganized.
Mm.
So it really took a while before, and I procrastinated as well because I was
Mm.
so intimidated. But yeah, we were able to create a show, and it was just one episode because it was so hard. And of course, it was just not my fault. I mean, there were many things that happened, the pandemic, and part of my team as well. They got affected by the typhoon in Cebu. Many things happened, but for the most part, we just were able to publish one because I was so overwhelmed. Was very exciting, but at the same time, it was very new. It was my first time to create a narrative podcast. So I had to do a lot of research, a lot of writing. I have to reach out to many guests. I have to do so many things. And being a mother with a toddler, it's also very
Oh.
busy at home. So I was like, when will I ever finish this? And then it just snowballed, and many things beyond my space also um, had to do with why it went into pod fade. So what did I
Mm.
learn from that experience? Because I experienced it myself.
Yeah.
You really have to create systems from the very beginning. Systems. Like, how do you want to do your podcast? What is your framework whenever you do your episodes? How do you plan your seasons? How do you plan your episode format? So what do you do when you reach out to your guests? So all
Mm.
those things, you have to create a system so you
Mm.
don't get overwhelmed. Because whenever you once you set those systems for you, you're going to make it easier for you to create the next episode and the next and the next and the next. And that is why that's also what I advise my clients. We create a system because I don't like them to get overwhelmed the same way I did when I started my own podcast.
That's true. And I'm also curious as to how much of an influence did your membership in Toastmasters, for example, and the time you spent on radio help you
Mm.
prepare to become a podcaster?
My journey with podcasting really started when a friend of mine in 2020, she needed a voiceover for her intro for her podcast. And like I said, I created her voiceover inside my closet. And she's still using the intro I created for her. So anyway, when she said, "Oh, PJ, why don't you start a podcast?" And I'm like, "What is a podcast? I don't know that." I was just so clueless. And then when I was researching more about it, oh, it's like radio. And I had a background in radio. It just, sparked again. And then a friend of mine who's already into podcasts invited me to do a podcast with him. And I'm like, sometimes without even knowing, just God just plans out everything. All you have to do is just take action. So everything fell into place and I got connected with my friend and I just started learning all these things. And I started to appreciate audio. I'm a very visual person because I'm a photographer. I'm a professional
Yeah.
photographer as well. I do fashion, I do beauty. I've done it for a long time and then it's like complete opposite. So I'm very visual. Now it's all audio, right? But what I liked about podcasting is that it's another way to share your story. I used to share stories through photos. Now I share stories through sound. It's
Mm.
also a different way to do things. And how did Toastmasters and how did my background in radio influence what I'm doing now? I think it has a lot to do with I love the intimate experience. Let's say with radio, the experience whenever you're speaking to people. I mean, for them when they're listening, they feel like you're just right beside them. I like that idea. And whenever I'm
Mhm.
also talking on the microphone when I'm in a DJ's booth, I have like my own little world. I can be whatever I want. I love that idea. And when it comes to Toastmasters, I joined because I'm an overthinker. I want to know how to structure what I say. And Toastmasters really helped me do that. Like,
Mm.
how do you start your speech? What should be
Right.
included in the speech? How do you end the speech? And that's what people remember. You just don't start talking. There has to be structure. And that's what I learned from Toastmasters. You really have to put structure in your storytelling and then just put your own spin on it, but the structure should be there. You have to captivate your audiences with the first words you're going to say so that they can make a decision. Should I listen to you? Is this important, right? And then really like I mean, I know I have a lot of fillers while talking, but as they listen to you, as you share your story to them, and then end it with something they can take with them that they will
Mhm.
not forget. That's what I learned with Toastmasters, and I'm very grateful for being a part of it because every time I write something, every time I speak, it's just there. You cannot unlearn it, and that's really
Mhm.
what I appreciate about it.
It's wonderful that becoming a podcaster helps you learn a whole range of skill sets or helps you harness a whole variety of them. For example, the year that you spent on radio helped you to understand that when you're dealing with an audio only medium, you have to always say the name of the people you're talking to because people on the street listening in their cars can't see who you're talking to, especially if it's a panel. And then, as you said, that being a Toastmaster helped you to organize your ideas so that there's structure behind it. Uh, I'm wondering, from an engineering perspective, in other words, how big a difference was it for you, for example, to find the right tech guy to help you put together all these episodes?
My partner, Brian Bruces, he's my partner for Visionary Media. We were already friends back in Dubai.
Okay.
And the crazy thing is, we met not through audio. He was my financial advisor. And we became very good friends. And then it was like 2005 when we met. We became very good friends. And then we lost touch. And then I don't know, somehow along the way, like year, he found me. He just messaged me on Facebook, and he was also into podcasting, and I was just starting like to explore podcasting. And what I loved about working with him is that he can read my mind, I can read his. It's important to me when I work with people that our values are aligned. I mean, he's very much focused on family as I am. And creatively, whenever I brainstorm with him, he understands as well. When he brainstorms with me, I understand. So we're like yin yang. We understand each other. And I love our partnership because, I bring out the best in him. He brings out the best in me. It's just the perfect balance of, creativity, values, and things like that. So we just found each other again. That's why I'm saying God just really laid out everything, and he allowed us to meet again. And my husband is also very much involved whenever we listen to a podcast. I mean, the episode that we create, like I also ask my husband, and then I will also ask, like, everyone's involved. It's like a family, and that's what I like about our partnership. It's like a family. You can be yourself whenever I record something, or I have an idea for a client. He also has suggestions. Similarly, I also have suggestions when we want to create a project. Like, we just throw ideas to each other, and we get it. So it's so easy to work with him, and I'm just blessed to have a partner that gets what's in my head, because my head, when you get inside, it's just creative chaos, but he gets it. And I love
Yeah,
working with him.
I think I understand what you're trying to say in the sense that he will have the technical expertise that can make things happen, and it's so gratifying when you don't have to explain too much and the person understands what you're trying to get at, so that
Mm-hmm.
the work flows smoothly,
Mm-hmm.
and putting out the shows becomes easier because you don't have to micromanage or to try to explain too much. Wonderful.
Yes.
And I can see that maybe in future episodes we could bring you back because we've barely touched the full spectrum of what you can share with the world. As an avid photographer, I'm certain you have some wonderful words of advice about how to communicate using the visual medium, uh, because there's always going to be the ongoing debate between the objectivity of black and white and the relativity of colored photos. And then there's always going to be which is better, analog or digital. So um, that would be a great episode to have you on as
Yeah, sure.
well to discuss that.
Yeah, I'd love to.
So yeah, um, just a little question because I'm kind of curious. I'm one of his biggest fans, his podcast, and I refer to Joe Rogan,
Mm-hmm.
especially when I listened to his interview with Elon Musk.
Mm-hmm.
It was unbelievable. I could not stand up, not even if my bladder was bursting, because
Mm.
the rawness of it, the authenticity of it, just was so riveting. He got Elon Musk to smoke weed for crying out loud.
Mhm.
um, so my question, I guess, is when it comes to length, because that was almost a 3 hour episode right there.
Yeah.
Uh, does it really matter when you're sharing something of value? Is there like a length, a prescribed length, or it's something again that depends. Something that doesn't really make a difference. What do you think?
Well, first of all, he is Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
So even if he spends 10 hours doing a podcast, I mean, he's already built his audience. He knows
Mm,
his audience very well.
yeah.
When it comes to time, it really depends on your target market because some
Mm,
people there's also what we call listener drop off. Okay,
yeah.
sometimes when you don't start your podcast, with a bang, because like I said earlier, there are many touch points when listeners contemplate and they think about it if they should listen in or not.
Mm,
Typically, this is what I see. If you're doing a solo episode, 10 to 20 minutes, actually even shorter than 20 minutes, is good
mm,
because it's just you talking. But whenever you're talking to someone, it could stretch to 45 minutes to an hour. So most of the time, I notice whenever there are interview formats, 45 to an hour usually is the sweet spot, because sometimes if it's just 30 minutes it could be very short, but then again, you can also break the rules. Again, just focus on your audience. Let's say you've published an episode that's 45 minutes, and you can tweak it as you go. So
yeah.
don't also be afraid when your first few episodes mess up, because you can always tweak as you go. You can improve as you go, and that's the beauty of podcasting. You don't have to really stick to just one thing time wise, right? Because you can constantly improve. The only time you really have to think about stopping is when you want to reformat your show, when you want to change the format. But if it's the same audience, the same topic, the length of the show, sometimes if you go over that, like if your shows are 30 minutes, you go over by 10, that's okay. That's forgivable as long as they enjoy it. So always get feedback from your audience so you know if it's too long or it's too short. So that's what I can say.
Wow. Thanks a lot. So now that we've come towards the end of our show, I'd like to ask you for some maybe words of encouragement for those who are seeking to also have kind of like have it all, where they're having a chance to watch their children grow and also to be an entrepreneur. Um, what would you advise, say, young ladies or young men who are unsure about what they want to do, but might be contemplating becoming a podcaster?
So first of all, whatever gender you have or whatever age you have, whatever life situation you have, you can always pursue your dream, whatever it may be. It's never too late. So let's say if you want to be a podcaster now and you have 8 children or whatever it is, it's just a matter of really prioritizing your time. If it gets really busy, just dedicate some time for you to really do these things that you love, and having a strong support system. Like my husband has been so supportive of me. R- I can't really thank him enough for supporting my dreams. um so having a very supportive partner is very, very vital as well. At the end of the day, when you want to pursue something and you are very busy with other things, it always is possible for anyone. Whatever dreams you want to pursue, whatever ambitions you have, just don't forget the most important things. I know some people always hear this, the illustration of the rocks, the soil, and the jar, right? So the rocks, you put them in first. They could be your spiritual activities, your personal life, your family life. They come in the jar. They go in the jar first, and everything else is sand. So
Mm,
know your priorities and boundaries, because let's say you pursue something that you like. it makes you creative. But if other areas in your life are crumbling, like your spiritual activities, most especially your personal time with your family, yourself, what's the point, right? It has to be a balance. And I'm speaking from experience as well, because I'm the type of person when I get very passionate about something that I do, because I am a creative, I just zone out. I'm very, very focused. But my mistake is that if one thing, let's say my business is flourishing, but my spiritual activities and my family life is getting compromised, I have to stop. I have to stop and rethink, because it doesn't have to go that way, right? So when you experience that, just stop and think about it. Um, there will always be a business, but your family, your relationship with God, those have to come first before anything else.
Wow. Thank you so much for that advice, PJ. Now, for our viewers who may want to reach out to you and perhaps engage your services, how do they find you?
Hello, everyone. If you are interested about learning podcasting, you can follow my Facebook page. It's Visionary Media. I'm also on LinkedIn and I'm also on Instagram. I put out content a few times a week, trying to teach everyone about podcasting. My website is coming up as well. I mean, it's not up yet, but probably next month. And I'm also working on a podcast. It's called the Visionary Podcast. So we are launching it on July 15. So I hope you support our podcast. It's going to be a very exciting podcast. It's geared towards business coaches, leaders, and thought leaders. And essentially, we are going to be featuring their inspiring stories. I'm going to feature a lot of very interesting guests, international guests as well. You might be very familiar with them too. At the same time, I'm going to be teaching you how to create a podcast, how to create compelling stories so that you develop an intimate relationship with your audience. So I hope you watch out for that. And if you are interested to work with us, you can email us at info@pjneri.com, or you can also email us at visionpod@pjneri.com. We would love to help you find your voice and transform lives through podcasting. Okay, so anyway, I consider myself, I call myself a multi passionate, because I have many passions: photography, I like baking, I like traveling, I love podcasting. So um, the beauty of podcasting, that one of the things that I love about podcasting is you are learning from the experts, right? You are getting like VIP seats to speak with them. Not everyone has that opportunity, right? So what am I about to share with you is I had a guest for my upcoming podcast. His name is Philip Van Dusen, and he is the person behind the brands Gap. I think Gap, Old Navy, GE, many other big brands. And when I interviewed him, at that moment, I was actually very confused, because, many marketers, many business owners, they always think they have this linear path. If I want to do email marketing, this is what I'm going to do. And for me, as a multi passionate, that was very difficult for me. I cannot just choose one path, because even if I'm podcasting now, I love photography. I am not me if I'm not taking pictures. So many people say, "Oh, ang gulo ng utak mo, ano bang gusto mong gawin?" For me, why is it a sin if you want to do a lot of things? I'm interested with a lot of things. But at that moment, I'm like thinking, is it a fault for me if I'm interested with these things? Should I just consider one thing? So I felt guilty most of the time. And when I spoke to Philip, it just really like opened my mind when he said, when you are confused, just follow your curious. Follow whatever you are curious about. So let's say if you are thinking about a topic to talk about on your podcast, let's say you are interested with golf, you're interested with fishing, you're interested with social media, you're interested with a lot of things. But what do you think can you talk about for hours? Or what do you think is a topic that you are so curious about that it will really drive you to research, to talk to people every single day? So that is my advice. If you are confused whether you are a business owner or you're a content creator, follow your curious. Follow whatever will spark your curiosity, because you will really make things happen because you are curious, not just because I'm known for this, and you know I I do this now. Some people, they're known for one thing, but they're not really excited about it anymore. So yes, so just follow your curious.
That is a good point. I finished a degree in fine arts, and there was a time I was a painting major. It's rather
Mm.
ironic that after 5 years in animation, back during paper and pencil before
Hmm.
digital, um, I turned into a trainer, so I became an HR professional. But recently, I'm building, meaning with my own two hands, an artist easel because I plan finally at the ripe old age of 59 to paint again.
Mhm. It's never too late. You know what I remember? What else I remember with what Philip Van Dusen told me? Because when I was having that dilemma, like I am so confused what to pursue. I feel like if I choose just one among all the other interests that I have, it almost feels like choosing one among your five children. See, so he said that artists, creatives, our minds are very different. If most people have this like linear path, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like from the day they're born, they know that they're going to be a doctor and they end up as a doctor. That's not, there's nothing wrong with that. But for artists, for creatives, ours is more of like a spider web, like this. So you can pursue whatever you want. So for me, I'm doing podcasting now. There's also a season for me that I'm a photographer, and there's also a season for me where I'm a baker, and there's nothing wrong with that. People are very interesting, and many things in life are interesting. So never hold back, just follow your curious.
That's true. And speaking of curiosity, um, maybe this is a chance for us to tell our viewers, uh, other than Spotify, what would be great uh, platforms for them to begin podcasting on?
There are many, many platforms that you can choose from, especially now that podcasting is really becoming more mainstream. And what I can recommend, there is Captivate.fm, there is Spreaker, there's the old Libsyn, but still works fine. And if you just don't want to overthink and want to start now, even if you don't have equipment, there's Anchor and it's free. There's also Substack. So these are the platforms that you can use to publish your podcast. And when you do that, they automatically go to podcast directories like Spotify and other directories, so that people can start listening to your podcast. So you can try out those recommendations.
So this goes to what you mentioned earlier about discoverability, because so many people are so difficult to find, often by accident. You just happen
Mm-hmm.
to type in a search engine, and
Mm-hmm.
then they show up as number 10, number 12. So this does help them be found.
Yes. And besides that, there are many ways for you to be discovered as well. Um, there's SEO. Your show notes have to be SEO optimized. The
Yeah.
way you name your show also matters, because at first glance they should already know what kind of podcast is this. And you cannot not market your podcast. You really have to show up and tell people that it exists, because if you're just going to talk on a microphone and expect people to just know that you have a podcast, it's not going to work. A
Yeah.
podcast, creating a podcast, being a content creator takes a lot of hard work. So you really have to use these avenues so that your podcast can be discovered.
Okay, so thank you so much, PJ. And as ever, our gratitude to your spending time on our show and helping us to produce a value laden episode. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So, on behalf of my fellow hosts here on the Leader's Edge, we'd like to thank PJ for taking time out to join us today. So we do hope, sincerely, I mean this, we do hope that we can invite her again for future episodes. And at the moment, let me share with everybody what's coming up on season 9, episode 6. We're going to have another Tambuli Toastmasters Club member. You heard from Jan Ace in episode number 4. And now you're going to hear from Angel Liquanan, who's going to talk about, do collagen supplements work? I would like to find out as well, because when you're on this a show as visual as this, I need to find out, will my wrinkles disappear? So um, definitely that's something that I would love to listen to. So if you enjoyed learning from this particular episode and any other episode, do us a favor and please click on the like, share, and subscribe button so that you will be notified when future episodes with other great content come along. Ladies and gentlemen, remember that learning is a never ending journey with limitless vistas. Good day. Thank you, PJ.